I'm here at the Rembrandt House Museum in beautiful Amsterdam, Netherlands with Epco Runia, the head of collections and curator here. Epco, Rembrandt came into etchings about 100 years after they were invented, and he changed the world forever with his incredible execution of this technique. Mm-hmm. What was it that was so significant about Rembrandt's contribution to etchings?
Well, that's a big question to start with. It's, I think the most important thing that Rembrandt did differently from a lot of other artists is that printmaking was usually used to reproduce artworks that were already existing. And Rembrandt, for each etching, makes a new design. Each etching is an artwork in itself.
So it isn't a recreation or a reproduction of a painting, it's a standalone artwork created exclusively to be released in etching form.
Exactly, and with all the features that comes with this special technique of etching, Rembrandt is always trying to figure out the best way to render things or to experiment with the technique. So all of these etchings have some different goal in it that Rembrandt was striving for.
You know, Rembrandt's paintings are housed in some of the greatest museums on the planet and some of the most prestigious private collections. What is it that makes the Rembrandt House Museum special? What is it that makes the collection here special and the entire experience unlike anything else on earth?
Well, it's a little bit a strange museum compared to the other ones because we're in the house where Rembrandt lived for almost 20 years, and what we did is to reconstruct the interior of the house like it was at his time. So you get into Rembrandt's world. That's the one thing that you can experience over here. You can get really close to him. And the other thing, we have quite an extensive collection of his etchings, and we show them. And that is something a lot of museums can't do, but we do.
I've heard it said that for Rembrandt, oftentimes he painted to sustain himself financially, but he etched his passions, and that it was a real passion project for him, each and every one of his etchings. With that in mind, the etchings that you've reviewed as an art historian, having worked at multiple prestigious museums here in the Netherlands, and now, you know, sort of being the caretaker of this, one of the great collections of those etchings in the world. Comment a little bit on that, about the heart and soul of Rembrandt in each of his etchings.
Well, Rembrandt is quite a fascinating artist. I could never have imagined that I would dedicate my life to just one artist, but Rembrandt is really somebody who can deliver enough interesting facts, details, research to be busy, no, not for just for one lifetime, but for a lot of lifetimes. What's interesting in Rembrandt is that he is always doing things differently from all the others. And to figure out what he exactly is doing, that's the one thing that makes it fascinating. The other thing that his artworks are far more often than other 17th century Dutch artists, his artworks are connected to his life and his personal artistic goals. A lot of artists in the 17th century are just interested in niches in the market, to sell their paintings, to study out this is a subject, that's something collectors or private persons would like to buy. So I'm focusing on just this one type of landscape painting, for example, because it sells well. And Rembrandt is always trying new things, not just one subject, not just one technique, painting, drawing, and etching. And always looking for different ways to render the visible world. So that makes him so fascinating, I think. Yeah.
It certainly does. And Rembrandt is known for a number of things. We'll try to get to as many as we can this evening. One of the things that Rembrandt is most well known for is chiaroscuro, the play of light and shadow. Speak to that a little bit.
Well, it's interesting because you can follow a little bit in his artworks, also in his etching, how he is discovering chiaroscuro. And really the first etchings, there are like drawings without any chiaroscuro, just the contour lines, the outlines of the figures. And after a while you see that he is experimenting what shadows do, what just one light source has for an impact on the scene. And usually when he's figuring that out, he enhances the drama of the scene. And drama is very important for Rembrandt because he likes to capture your attention. He wants you to be fascinated by what you're seeing, by the story that he is telling. And light and shadow is a way for him to grab your attention really close to these etchings, but also in his paintings. So
it's almost a play for emotion, as opposed to using it just to enhance the sort of realism or to make the shadows make sense and that kind of thing. He's using light and shadow to portray emotional intent, which is something that's groundbreaking at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
So he wasn't just influenced by Caravaggio and this concept of chiaroscuro. He was.
I think he's much more interested in the chiaroscuro point than Caravaggio. Caravaggio is also, that was of course a very important step in art history, but Rembrandt went on that, on these, and took it really a step further.
Yeah, far deeper than Caravaggio ever did. One of the great influences in Rembrandt's life was the German artist Albrecht Dürer, of which Park West is one of the largest dealers of his woodcuts and engravings worldwide. Talk about the influence and the relationship between these two great artists who could never meet, because of course it wasn't the same time, but certainly there was a relationship.
Yeah, Rembrandt was really a fan of Dürer, and he collected prints of Dürer, of course, and he was also a little bit inspired by Dürer, I think, in the aspect that he rendered his self-portrait. He is sometimes dressed as a 16th century artist, really resembling Dürer. So he is putting himself in one line as a pupil of Dürer in some of these self-portraits. And he is also imitating prints by Dürer and trying to improve them, to make them into his own version. And in his mind, and probably it was even a better version.
So we're in one of the studios here at the Rembrandt House Museum where Rembrandt would have created, and there are places in his studios where his students would work. He had students that would prepare the canvas for him, stretch the canvas for him, and even paint on his works that would eventually be sold and released under his name. Talk a little bit about the relationship between Rembrandt as a studio artist and his students.
Well, these students came to Rembrandt when they were already at the end of their teaching period. So they had the basics from another teacher, came to Rembrandt because they wanted to know just this typical style of Rembrandt and learn to paint like that themselves as well, because there was quite some interest from buyers of this typical Rembrandt style with the chiaroscuro, with the loose pencil strokes. And Rembrandt was popular, so these pupils wanted to become as popular as Rembrandt was. They had to pay to be taught here, so it was a way for Rembrandt as well to earn money. And besides from that, these pupils, who were already good painters when they came into the studio, could produce paintings as well under the guidance of Rembrandt. And when these paintings were good enough, even Rembrandt would put his signature on it, and it would be sold as a product of the studio. So in a way, they had an important role in what is a kind of the painting factory that this house was in Rembrandt's time.
If you visit the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia, there's an incredible display of not just the paintings of Rembrandt, but the paintings of Rembrandt that were involved with students painting on them as well. The students of Rembrandt become a feature there, which is, I guess, a little bit unusual, but it's interesting how the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah.
Of course, in modern day painters, studio painting is a very typical way to create. So I just thought that was an interesting point that I learned today. I've been to the Rembrandt House Museum. This was probably my 10th or 12th visit today, and I learned just today about that. Well, that was very exciting.
Never old to learn.
Rembrandt would go on to become arguably the greatest etcher of all time. To what do you attribute that?
Well, one of the most important things is, I think, the way he is always experimenting in his etchings. So it's not just set, you see how he's searching for the best solution, for the best way to render the light, the shadows, the lines, to express emotions. And you can look at them from really close and see a lot of details in them. Not only details in like a little dog that's playing in a corner or something like that, or a child that is making noise. There's a lot of noise in his scene as well. But also in a technical perspective. From a technical perspective, you can see how the shadows are made. These lines never become one block of blackness. It's always lines and cross sections that you can, and in the way he builds up these shadows. So the thing that makes Rembrandt's etchings, I think, the most fascinating is because they're visually so enormously rich. You can look at them for a very long time and always discover new details.
His etchings were incredibly diverse in terms of the subject matter, from portraits and biblical scenes to genre scenes and beggars and musicians, and the list goes on and on. How did he select his subjects?
Well, I'm not quite sure, of course, because I wasn't there at the time. I would have loved to be there. But I think what was really important for Rembrandt was drawing after nature. So he wanted to show, to render what he saw in his surroundings, but also in his mind. So whenever there's a biblical scene, of course, he couldn't have seen something like that because it was way before his time. But he wants to create the impression that you as a viewer have the impression that Rembrandt was there at that moment, present in this biblical scene. So he's always looking for things that are visually interesting. Is it a biblical scene? Is it a dog sleeping? These impoverished people that are walking on the street. These are all subjects that he liked and was fascinated about. He was especially interested, I think, in these a little bit non-idealistic subjects, and way of rendering is also very often a little bit coarse. He shows how the things are, how nature is, and not making things more beautiful than they actually are.
Sometimes it's been said in his portraits of people, it'll be not just a portrait of their face, but sort of a portrait of their character as reflected in the face that he creates for them. In this house, there are a number of examples of artifacts that he collected from all around the world. And part of that was because he never himself traveled overseas, and he wanted to be able to include those in the artwork. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that's an important reason for him to collect all these objects from all around the world. But it's also the thing that I just mentioned earlier, this fascination for the visual world. It's not just that he wants to use them in artworks, he wants to look at the things, how they present you in the eye, and that's an obsession, and that's maybe also just a bias thing. He's obsessed by buying. It's as ordinary as that as well, but he really spends far too much money on all these subjects, and it's one of his reasons why he almost went bankrupt in the end. So.
Rembrandt has been called the master of psychological portraiture. Would you comment a little on how he gained that title?
Rembrandt tries to tell stories, whatever stories are, but it's the biblical stories, but also in these genre scenes of everyday life, he tells stories. Also in a portrait, he tells stories. And he doesn't have words. So the only way to tell these stories is by expression. Clothing, attributes, hats, funny hairdress, things like that, and with facial expressions and gestures of hands. That's the way how he tells how the people are interacting in his scenes. And he is very good at that. He tries it out. He is seeking for the best way to look, but he always finds new ways, because there's a lot of standardized gestures in the 17th century that you could use. Of course, we still have use these gestures today, but Rembrandt is always looking at people, remembering, taking it all in, and then using gestures and facial expressions that he earlier saw in real life.
So it was almost like trying to access more of what was going on inside of them than just exactly what they were doing at the moment when he chose to create them into the artwork.
Yeah, he really has a good feel for what people are feeling, are thinking, and are saying at a certain point in this story. And that's what he likes to show in his artworks.
Rembrandt was known for creating many states of the plate. I think up to 8 states, if I recall, when he was creating his etchings. I think that's correct. And so in terms of the states, why did he incorporate that into his creative process?
Well, that's an interesting thing. I think that's something new that Rembrandt introduced in his prints. And I think it's a little bit because buyers are interested in that. So what he does, he is working on this etching plate, and he, for himself, wants to test if everything is all right. So he makes a print and looks at the paper, how it came out. So it's a way, just a part of the process for himself. But then in a certain point in 17th century, collectors become interested in these phases, in these steps in the artistic process of an artist, and they want to buy them. So Rembrandt thinks, okay, if you want to buy them, I print them for you, and you can sell them in my shop. So it's part of the artistic process becomes commercially interested.
We know that Rembrandt created over 300 etchings during his career. Only about 1/3 of those etchings survive to today. Do we have any idea where the missing plates are?
I think they went into kitchen pots, melted, and used in other, because it's copper. You can use it for a lot of utensils and purposes. But I'm not sure. It could also be that they they were bought maybe by an editor and a publisher of prints, used for a while, and then, well, there wasn't any interest anymore, and they just disappeared in an attic or something like that. Because it's even more interesting to look why these other ones have been preserved. And this is a set of prints that Rembrandt sold to a publisher, and this publisher made new prints from them. So they also together were sold in the 20th century, and became dispersed in different collections. So I think it's a beautiful coincidence that we still have this set of 1/3 of the etching plates, and that not these have been disappeared also, like the others.
In terms of the Rembrandt House Museum, how many of the original etching plates do you own?
We own 4 of them, and we have some as loans from other owners. So there are in total 10 in our museum.
So the copper plates that are displayed in the museum behind glass, those are the ones
Those
that
are
are
the
actual,
real things.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
So one of the major catalogs, the New Holstein catalog, has talked about how they are able to use digital technology today and advances in photography to individually photograph each of the states, and then using technology, be able to look at them in a much more complex way than was ever before possible. How has that impacted the scholarship as it relates to Rembrandt etchings?
I think it has changed a lot because now we can far more easily assess prints that we see and that we want to know of if it's really a print from Rembrandt's time or a later print, and you can find it all in the New Holstein. So it made things a lot easier for us, and I think the public benefits from that. We get a lot of questions from people. I have found this print of Rembrandt in the attic, or it was donated by somebody to my grandfather, and now I want to know what it's worth. Well, we can't say anything about prices, but we can say something about which date it is. Is it rare, or is it quite a more common print? So it made things a lot easier.
In terms of Rembrandt's mystique, in terms of the interest and fervor and excitement to collect his art, if anything, it's greater now than ever before 350 years later. To what do you attribute this allure of Rembrandt van Rijn?
I think it's one thing is that it's about looking. So it's not bordered by countries. You don't need language to look and appreciate an artwork by Rembrandt. You can look at them and everybody can look. That's what we are made of, with eyes. So I think that makes art very accessible for people, visual art. But there's one thing that makes Rembrandt so alluring, and that's his art is about people, and we are all people. So it's really easy to connect to these scenes and these artworks that Rembrandt made.
So Rembrandt was here. Those 3 magic words make us feel close to the incredible genius artist, even though obviously we're separated by hundreds of years of time. What is it about the museum experience here in Amsterdam that brings us closer to the genius?
Well, you can see how he lived and worked. The interesting thing about this house is that it was big enough for Rembrandt to house his living quarters for his family and himself and his servants, but also had room enough for his studio. His studio is a place for his pupils, quite a large studio for himself. And so we can, whenever you come to this museum, you can experience how he lived and worked. And those two combined is what, well, Rembrandt is all about. It's about life and it's about art. So I think this making this museum different and a little bit more special than the regular art museum, maybe.
Let's talk for just a moment of the losses in Rembrandt's life. It's pretty incredible. You have it outlined in one of the rooms here as a timeline. and you see him fall in love, and then the person dies, and have a child, and then the child dies. It really is a story of incredible perseverance against just awful personal, I don't know if you want to call it luck or fortune, but he manages to find beauty and to find that mirror that every artist is looking for to turn back on the world in such an incredible way, despite his personal losses being so frequent and just so horrifying throughout his entire life.
Yes, I think he became a more interesting personality through all these losses. The loss can help you also in becoming a more interesting person, maybe. And that is what you see, because in the start of his life, he really was a kind of society figure. He was immensely popular in Amsterdam, painted the portraits of all the rich and famous in this booming city that it was at the time. And after his wife died, that stopped. He stopped making portraits, is looking for new ways to render the world, the visible world, for new art form. And his later style is completely different from what he did at the start. And in between, there's some almost 15 years, 10, 15 years, in which he is searching for new things, for new style and a new way of living. And that's also the part that he makes most of his prints. So these prints are a kind of remedy for him. It's one of the ways to come over the loss of his beloved wife.
So not only are the etchings a powerful testament to his incredible technical ability, but they also have some personal sort of remedies, sort of a prescription for what he was feeling.
Certainly did.
Incredible.
Certainly did.
So for Rembrandt, etchings were an incredibly personal, incredibly intimate experience. As an art historian and the curator of this incredible facility, do you feel closer to Rembrandt when you're reading his etchings?
A little bit so, I think. And that also has to do with the size of these etchings. The paintings are, of course, much larger, and you're looking at them from quite some distance. Rembrandt also has written that down, that you shouldn't look at them from too up close, because you have to stand on a certain distance to see what forms it is, not just the paint. From up close you can see the paint, from a certain distance you can see the image. But with the etchings it's a little bit different, because they are smaller, they are paper, and you look at them in your hand. So you look at them from up close. And you get close to them. And they are as visually rich as the paintings, but they're black and white. And so you, in your head, you need to process the image and making it into an actual image and see what it's all about. So looking at them, you establish a kind of relationship with it. It takes time to look at these prints, and that makes it them even more interesting, I think.
Here at the museum, you have an experimentation area where people can actually get their hands dirty and they can try to create art and experiment with some of the techniques of Rembrandt. Talk about Rembrandt's experimental side, especially as it relates to his prints, his etchings.
It's really interesting, because he always tries new things, and one of the things he does, for example, is using different types of paper. The usual paper that was about here in Europe was made of cloth, old cloth. This is a certain kind of, it's beautiful paper. It's very nice, but there's also something like Japanese paper. And in Japan, paper was made of trees, bark of trees, kampi trees. And this paper is much more smoother and has a certain shine to it. So Rembrandt sometimes, all of a sudden, prints one of his etchings on Japanese paper, and we think these were the more luxurious editions of the print. And they really have a different feel and a different look to them. They are shiny and a little bit hazy and completely different from these others. So that's one of his experiments. The other thing that he does is leaving ink on the etching plate when it's printed, and that delivers a kind of, well, we call it the plate tone to the print. So there's some grayish area in the sky, for example, in some prints, but in others it's completely invisible, it's not there. So each of these prints delivers a new artwork. Not two of them are exactly the same.
And it's sort of to the taste of the artist, so whatever he was feeling in that moment and that day could determine whether he included the atmospherics or not. The plate tone, obviously, is what gives you that sort of atmosphere in the piece, and it again is entirely up to the taste of the artist that day, which is remarkable.
It was his personal artistic challenge.
Decades ago, Park West Gallery took a position in the Rembrandt market, and we view ourselves in some ways as custodians of that market and caretakers of the Rembrandt etching market specifically. And I just want to thank you on behalf of our millions of collectors worldwide who have enjoyed Rembrandt's work and Rembrandt's etchings, for keeping a flame for that particular art form by Rembrandt here in Amsterdam, and for giving it the proper place that it deserves as incredible, breathtaking, monumental, life-changing, game-changing for the world of art. What you've done here is incredible, and on behalf of our collectors, I just want to say thank you to you. We all feel personally connected to Rembrandt, and it's clear by sitting here and spending this time with you that you feel very much personally connected to him as well. So I want to thank you for your work and the work of this museum, and I hope that there'll be ways in the future that our foundation can partner with you all here, and any help that we can possibly give, we'd love to do so.
Thank you, that's great.